In this video we're going to look at logical functions. So the functions we will look at is the if formula, the and formula, the or formula and the if-error formula. In your ribbon, if you go to formulas, you'll see under the function library there's a category called logical, and in here you'll see the functions we are going to discuss in this video. There's and, if-error, or, and some others which we won't discuss in this video. If is one of, I think, the most useful formulas in Excel. This, I would say, is one of the top 10 formulas you really should try and get the hang of, and it will save you endless hours and make a lot of your task much simpler. So this is, I would say, maybe even in the top 5 of the most important formulas in Excel. I will explain out how it works step by step. So let's take an example here. It's just a very simple example where I say if the test mark is more than 50, it's a pass, otherwise it's a fail. So there's our mark, and here in this cell C7 we want to see whether the student has passed or failed. You can enter the formula in one of two ways, or three ways really. You can use it from the formula bar here, the insert function button, or you can simply type it. Because it's the first time we're going to do it, I'm going to use the function library. So if you click on logical, you want to use the if formula, you'll get this dialog box. So the if formula has three parts to it. First, there's something you want to test, which I call the logical test. If this test passes, you'll get a value of true. If this value is true, what you want to happen, or if the value is false, what you want to happen. So this formula will always, or the first test will always either follow this route or this route. So let me show you. So the test we want to do is to test whether that mark that a student got is more than 50. So what's the logical test? You can from here click on the cell that the mark is in. So if that mark is more than, and then type in 50. If that mark is more than 50, what do you want to happen? I want to display the word pass. So if you work with text in Excel, in double quotes, you just put the word pass. And if the student fail, and then we want to see the text fail. So here on the side you can see currently that test will pass, it will become true, and then you will see pass, and here at the bottom you'll see the formula result will end up in pass. So let's click OK, and there you go. So 65 is a pass mark. If I now change this mark to 40, you'll see it's a fail mark. For all formulas, not just the if formula, be careful for the edge case. The edge case is the point at which the condition changes. If I make this 50, it is a fail mark. If I make it 51, it's a pass mark. So if the test was supposed to be 50 or more, this formula, if I click on the function again, this formula should have said bigger than and equal to 50. Then it would be a pass at 51 and also a pass at 50, or a fail at 49. For the rest of these examples, I won't look at that edge case, and I will only look at bigger than. But be careful of these edge cases. When a condition changes from true to false, exactly what you want to happen. I could have left it at bigger than and put this mark at 49. That could also be an issue if you work with decimal places, because if I say more than 49, then 49.5 would also be a pass. So just think carefully in what you put your condition in here. The common way of doing it would have been bigger than and equal to 50. So that's one way of putting the formula in. I'm just going to change this back to a pass mark. The way I prefer to do this, and you will get there over time if you're not used to the if formula, is simply by typing the formula. So go to the cell, start with the equal sign, look for the if formula, so there it's on top, press the tab key. So what's the test I want to do? So again, similar as what we did before, I click on the cell. If that is more than 50, then give me a pass. else give me a fail. And that's how you get the fail. So there is your formula. If you ever want to show a formula in Excel, if you want to, if I wanted in this cell to show you the formula, this is just an extra little tip you can do. Go into a cell, select the whole formula, Control C, press Escape, go to a blank cell, go in there again, paste the formula again. Currently, if I press Enter, you'll actually see the formula trying to execute. But if you go back into the formula and right in front of the equal sign, if you put a single quotation mark, it will change this from a formula to a text string, and the formula will show on screen. So this is a very simple way or effective way to show your formulas on screen if you want to. Later, when we look at more advanced formulas, you will see some other ways of doing this as well, but this is a very quick way of showing a formula. That's what I wanted to show you there. So this is how you use the if formula. So if a condition is true, what must happen? If it's not true, what must happen? So let's go to another example. This one is a little bit more complicated. So what it says here is if a mark is more than 50, it's a pass mark, same as before, but now there's an additional condition onto this. It says if the test mark is more than 80, the person have a distinction. So how would you do this? And I think this is where a lot of people that's new to the if formula give up in frustration, because the formula, putting one if formula inside another if formula, seems a bit overwhelming and very complicated. So what I'm going to show you here, and you'll see in all my lectures, I keep doing this over and over, is showing you a simple way of writing very complicated formulas without having to memorize them. So let's start. So first of all, I'm just going to write the formula like before to say whether the student pass or fail. So I'll say here, if, press tab, that mark is more than 50, then it's a pass, else it's a fail. So simple, one if formula, one condition, and one set of results. Now forget about that piece of the formula. Now write this one as completely on its own. Again, if it's more than 80, it's a distinction, so we'll do the same kind of thing. If that mark is more than 80, then it's a distinction. Then there's a distinction, else. What will be true if it's not a distinction? This is not true. You can't say it's a distinction, else it's a pass. It would seem like it's true, but if you think carefully about it, yes, it is true if you got 95, it's true if you got 60 that you've passed, but look what happens if I say I got 40. So I actually failed, but this they say I've passed. So be careful in how you set your conditions. The real answer here should be if I did not get a distinction, that's exactly what I must say. So what I should say, not that I passed or failed, that it is not a distinction. That is always true. So now if I got 40, I failed and I don't have a distinction. If I got 65, I pass and I still don't have a distinction. But if I have 90, I pass and I do have a distinction. So the next step is where you combine this to become one formula. In this method of mine, always start at one point and putting in the conditions one by one. I've put in 2 conditions here to make it simple. Later when you look at my video on text formulas, you'll see where I use 5, 6, 7 formulas in one. Always have a path. So I start here, then I do that test, then if I was more tests I would do them underneath, or sometimes I do them in columns. So I do one test here, then the next test, then the next test. So do the tests one by one. So this, you will agree, is not too complicated. That's how you decide if it's pass or fail, and this is how you decide whether distinction or not. Now that I've reached the end, this is the end now, I can now decide how do I make this one formula. So let me show you how you can make this one formula without having to do a step in between. So if you look here, if you've got a distinction, you'll have more than 80. If you don't have a distinction, then you've either passed or failed. So what you need to do is take this formula, and this is the only thing you have to be careful with my method, is you're going to copy one formula into the next. If you copy one formula into the next, select the formula without the equal sign. So I press Ctrl C. Also important, press escape, go to your next formula, and there we say I don't have a distinction. Rather than saying you don't have a distinction, say this. So you paste in the previous formula. So now the way you should read it is, if I got more than 80, it's a distinction. If I don't have a distinction, then if I have more than 50, I've passed, otherwise I failed. And the way I described it to you, it also make it more simple for you when you write your own if formulas. Make a narrative out of it. Repeat it back to yourself the way it's written in a sentence. So just like I did. So if this is true, then this will happen. If it's not true, then if this is true, that will happen, else this will happen. So I press enter, and now you can see I've got a distinction, and technically we won't need this formula now. Let's go back to the actual mark. If I have 40, it's a fail. If I have 55, it's a pass, and if I have 90, it's a distinction. So if I take this formula, I'm just going to put it down here like I showed you before. If you are new to the formula or to the if formula, this will be a bit complicated to try and write. You'll see in my later lectures I write some formulas where there's 6 or 7 of these in one formula, and people often ask me, how do I keep track on how do I write such complicated formulas? And really all I really do is write very simple formulas and then just have this method of combining them. So there's 2 more logical formulas we will look at that can work in conjunction with the if formula. The first one is the AND formula. The AND formula and the OR formula is the other one we're going to look at. Always gives you one result only. It will give you true or false. So first I'm going to explain to you how the formulas work, and then you'll see how we can use it within the if formula. So let's look at the AND formula now. I say I'm looking for a red BMW. What this means is the car must be red and a BMW. I'm not looking for a red Volvo, I'm not looking for a blue Volvo, I'm not looking for a white BMW. Both those 2 conditions must be met. So the way you do this formula, so I'm just going to type it in. You start typing and what's the first condition? Similar to what we did for the if formula. So first condition, you click on it. If that condition equals to red, so that's what we need it to be red, and then we put in a comma and put in the second condition. Second condition is that must be equal to a BMW. Close it, close the bracket, and press enter. So that is true, because now that is what I was looking for, a red BMW. If I make this blue, you'll see it become false, because both these 2 conditions need to be fulfilled before this is true. If I make it red again, you'll see it's true, but if I now make this, say, a Volvo, it becomes false again. So that's the 2 conditions that needs to be met. If you are not comfortable typing it out, you can still use this insert function to show you a dialog box. So here you can see condition after condition, and if you click on the last condition, you'll get a new text box, and it will keep adding text boxes, and you can have as many of these conditions as you want. In this example I've put 2 conditions for simplicity, but you can say I have in this example I have 5 conditions, and all of them, every single one needs to be met before the answer of this whole formula will result to true. So that is the AND formula. The next one we'll look at is the OR formula. So this is only one of these conditions needs to be met. So this time I say I want a fast car or a blue car. So let's see how that will work. So if I say OR, that is equal to blue, and that is equal to fast. It's true, but remember this should have been blue, but it's red. If I make this blue, it will still be true because one of the conditions are met. If I make it red and I make this car slow, it will become false. So I want at least one of those two things to be true. The car must at least be fast or blue. If it's slow and red, I don't want it. If it's slow and blue, I'll still take it because at least the color is met. So this is one of these conditions are met. So blue and fast. So this is something you'll have to get used to, where in the AND formula both of these conditions need to be met. Here only one of these conditions. Similar than before, if you click on the dialog box of the formula, you can have as many conditions. So you can have again up to, I don't think there's a limit, or not a low limit. You can see here you can have 255 conditions, but you can say quite a few conditions, and any one of them is met, this formula will be true. So all you need is one true, and then it's true. Doesn't matter if all the others are false. Now I'll show you how we actually use this. This is a practical example, maybe a little bit morbid, but it is something that actually happened in practice. So let's say at our company we need to fire some people, and the brief we got is that if your job is an accountant and your salary is more than 50,000, you need to be fired. So let's see how we would do that. Again, I wouldn't try and write a formula in one go. So first I will write the formula to check if both those conditions are met. So that's, in this case, you must be an accountant and your salary must be more. So it's an AND formula. So I'll say AND that is equal to accountant in text and that should be more than 50,000, and close the brackets. So it's true for that case, and that's the only one. There's nothing wrong with the way I wrote this formula, but something else for most formulas. If you're gonna reapply it and you think you might have to change some of these parameters, just now they say actually no, the salary should be 45,000 or the job should actually be a manager, then you'll have to come in this formula and change all of them. So I'll show you my preferred way of doing a formula, especially if you're not sure if things will change or not. So I'm going to just do the AND formula again, and so this time I say if the job, comma, and rather than typing accountant, you'll see on the side here I've added it into separate cells. If I say the accountant is equal to that cell and the salary is more than H3, close the bracket, and that's now true. And again, now in my video on relative referencing, you will know what will happen if I drag this down. This is a bit deceiving now, because if I make this, let's say 40,000, so this is accountant and it's 60,000, it's true, but here it's accountant and it's 50,000, which is more than 40,000. So why do we get false? And this is, we have to be very careful if you copy and paste formulas or just drag them down. What happens here, if I go back to this formula, if you click on it, you see what happens. This is a relative referencing where the formula is moved down, so the reference to where my cells are also moved down, and that's why the formula doesn't make sense anymore. So what I would suggest is, I'll show you from scratch one more time. If I say and this formula is equal to, and you select the accountant cell, and this time I press F4, it will insert those dollar signs, which means the cell will now be fixed. Then I say comma for the next condition, the salary must be more than, click on the 40,000, press F4 again, to fix that cell, close the bracket, and now if I drag this formula down, it should work. So now this is an accountant that needs to be fired, this is an account that needs to be fired. Now if I change this back to 50,000, only the top accountant is the accountant to be fired. But in this formula, like I said before, we're going to use the AND and the IF formula together. Currently you will see that we don't want to see true or false, we want to see maybe the word fire or the word keep. So I'm just going to write it in the next formula. I'm going to say if this is true, this fire AND clause is true, then I want to see the word fire, else, comma, I want to see the word keep. Close that, close the bracket. So now you'll see here the top person will be fired, the rest will be kept. If I change this to 40,000, you will see there's 2 people that needs to be fired. So let's make this 50,000 again, and you can see here it's very handy having this condition somewhere else in the set. Currently I'm showing it to you on one sheet, but you could have one sheet with the conditions and the next sheet with the actual data, and then you can easily change these parameters and see a different result. So how do I make 2 formulas one? So if you click on the final result, you'll see here that if this cell is true, then I want to see fire and then keep. So if I go to the previous example, I'll copy this formula without the equal sign, press escape, go to the answer, and there where you see E6, I'm going to actually paste the old formula in, press enter, and you'll see there you'll get the fire. Now you don't need this. If you look at it, if you drag this down, it will work. So this was needed. So now we've written one formula that's quite big formula without having to think too much about how it combines into each other. Something you must be careful of now, if I copy this back to the formula, the column I want it in, you'll see something odd happening. So why is this happening? Again, it's a case of relative referencing. You see now it happened because I copied it to the left. These 2 cells also moved to the left. The best way to copy it sideways without having to make everything fixed is go to the cell, let me just delete that, go to the cell where the formula is working correctly, select the formula including the equal sign this time, Control C, press escape, go into this, and in the formula bar you paste the formula. That will, if you copy and paste the formula that way, it will not use relative referencing, and it will use exactly symbol for symbol the same formula. So if I press enter, there you get the fire. So we don't need this now, and we can drag this down. So there you go, see all accountants above 50 is now marked. If I say 40,000, there you can see your fire, and I'm just going to show you on the screen that, remember, if you put a single quote sign and then paste the formula, it will show up. So that is not an easy formula to type from memory, but in my method you don't need to know that whole formula and how to type it from scratch. Type the one part of the formula, type the next part of the formula, and then copy the formulas into each other. That's a much simpler way. So that is an example of AND. So let's show you an OR example. So here is where I say, okay, in this case we want to fire everybody that's either an accountant, so that means all accountants needs to go, or any other person including accountant whose salary is more than 50. So this is where we use the OR formula. Again, start with the OR formula, press tab. If that is equal to the accountant, or that is more than the 50,000, you'll see that's now true. Everything here is true. Made my own mistake, very good. So I'm going to delete that. What we should have done is make those fixed references, and there you go. So all these people here have 50 or more, or they are accountants. So if I change this to 40,000, everybody will have to be fired, which is not very effective. Let's make this 60,000, or actually 55,000. Now you'll see that still all the accountants are going, plus this manager. If I make it even 81,000, you'll see the manager will stay, but all accountants will still go irrelative of their salary, so it's always going to be true for them. So let's just go back to 50,000. So in the next part of the formula we can do the if part. Remember what I said, I put these formulas, these variables on the side here, so you don't have to keep changing them. I've also now say, remember in the previous formula I said if the value is true I need to say fire, otherwise I need to say keep. What I do here is, rather than typing it out like that, I've also put it into two cells. So let's see how that would work. I would say if, press tab, if this is true, then I want you to say fire, otherwise I want you to say keep. Very important, if you have your variables to the side, lock them in place, absolute referencing, and close. And if I drag it down, you'll see now all those people need to get fired, those people can be kept. If I make this cleaner, for instance, you'll see the cleaner also needs to go. And if I make this, let me just see how much the other accountant gets. If I make this 55,000, you'll see those people get more than 55,000, and this guy is a cleaner, so although he doesn't get 55,000, he's a cleaner, which is the other condition. I'll just change it back to its previous conditions. There you go. And now again I'm just going to copy this part of the formula without the equal sign, press escape, go to that formula where I want to put it in, and in that cell I need to paste the formula in, and there you go, it will work. And now I don't need this piece of the formula, so this is what we need. And then if I want to copy it over to the left, I just copy that, press escape, including the equal sign, and in this formula bar I just paste a new formula, and now we don't need this. And bring it down, and again just to show you the formula, I'm copying the formula including the equal sign in here with a single quote. I'm just going to show you the formula. So here is a very simple method of writing a formula like that. If this is new to you right now, this might look like quite complex formula, but on its own it was not that complicated. So this is just a way of writing very complex formulas quite simple. And again, you can change these variables if you have them. You don't have to do this if it's something you're going to do once off and it's quite simple. You can, like in the beginning here, write it inside the formula without having the conditions on the side. So that is the OR formula. That's how you would combine the AND and OR formula inside the IF formula. The last function we're going to look at here is the IFERROR formula. So sometimes, let's say we have in this case sales, just could be either let's say this is units of sales, so we sell products and this is how many we sold, and then the people would say how many of those were defective and returned. So for this office maybe there was 5 returns, there was 6 returns, there was no returns, and here somebody actually wrote the word none, and here somebody didn't even bother filling in the answer. Now if we want to see out of every how many units did we get a defect, the answer would be to divide the two by each other. So if I say the sales divided by the defects will give me an answer. So for every 32,000 units there was 1 defect. If I copy this down, there we are dividing by 0, which is an error. You can't divide by 0, which is why you get an error. And here you're trying to divide by a text field, which is also an error. But in practice you might want to allow people to either say 0 because it makes sense, there was no defects, or you don't mind if they put in a word like none. So this is where the if error comes in. So write your formula first, make sure it makes sense, then go to the top one, and just after the equal sign start typing if error. Here's your if error, press tab. So your condition is your value, so you can go to the end of the formula. If this gives you an error, what do you want to have happen? So I'm going to put in comma. For now I'm going to put 2 double quotes on right next to each other, close that and press enter. So what this means is, if there's an error in this formula, just give me nothing. So if I copy this down now, oops, let me just copy it down, you'll see wherever we had an error, now we just have a blank cell. Be careful if you're going to use this formula, this method of putting a blank there, don't put a space in the equal sign here. I'm going to do it now to show you what the issue could be. So I'm going to say if it's an error, do that. So I'm just going to copy this down. The problem is, if I select this, this here becomes a space rather than a blank, and if you try and add it into other formulas, you might get errors because a space converts into a text field. So what I'll do, take out the space there and then take it down. What you can also do is say, I want to say if I couldn't find this out, I'm going to say the answer should be 0, so you can have a number in there as well. So now, because of my formatting, I'll just take my formatting back to general, so you can see if it doesn't know what to do, it will, or if it's an error, it will put 0 in. Or the last thing you could maybe consider, or one of the other options you can consider, is to write a message. And now as soon as you get the error, it will say not that, whatever you want to say, or you can even write a formula. But the most common use for this, for me, is to leave it as a blank cell. So this means if it was an error, let me just format this back so it looks a bit more aesthetic. The decimal, so I can say for any 32,000 units there was an error. There is a caveat to using this. You must be confident in your formulas. If you wrote this formula wrong here and then say if error, you will never know that you've made a mistake, because if you made a mistake and then the formula gives you an error, you will hide it and you will not know that you've made a mistake. So be confident that your formula is correct. You know this divided by that is correct, and you know this can happen. But maybe if you wanted to make sure that they use a number and they've written the word none, you will never see that they've used the word none. So if I just take the if error part out again, so if you know errors in Excel, let me just take that out. In Excel, you'll know that this is 2 different errors. This means you're trying to divide by 0, and this just means it doesn't make sense. And the if error will treat both of this the same, and you will not pick up things like this. So make sure of your data before you use the if error, otherwise you'll obscure some of your own mistakes. But it is a very useful formula, especially to make data more readable and make reports more aesthetic, so that it doesn't show the ugly error in the actual report. Now for the bit more advanced things, I need to show you a thing or two. First of all, I'm gonna say next to these values, so I've got a 1, a 0, let me actually add another value here, say 500. So this is just some random values. I want to show you what the effect of some of these will be. In the if formula, if you remember when I combined some of them, I just said if I had a value of whatever here, true or false, so I just said if that. So you see it's not a normal condition, it's just referencing a cell. So if this, then I want to say, for now I'm going to want to show you, does this equate to true or false? So I'm just going to write out the word true here, and the word false, and close the bracket. So what I want to show you is if you reference only a cell with a number in, it will become true. So you see that becomes true, that becomes false, and this is the binary nature of the logical formula. Something can either be true or false. What Excel does, and a lot of programming languages that's the same, if you refer to something that's in a cell, it will say what is the best option for me to refer or to convert this into a true or false, and it decides any number will become true. Unless it's 0, it will become false. So if I take a number, remember I said number 500 here, it will still be true. So any number will be true. Even minus 500 will still be true. But a 0 will become false. So if you have a number and there's a 0 in there, you don't have to say if the number is 0 then make it false. If you just say the number, it will assume false. If you just say the number and there is a number in there, it will assume true. Again, if you also have the word true, it will assume true, because true is true, and same for false. If you have words or text in there, you will get an error. So this is where the value comes in. So it doesn't know if there's a word in there, say ABC in this example, it doesn't know what to do. That's why you get that error. But if there's a blank, you will get false again. Blank and 0 will give you false. The word false will give you false, but any number will give you true, and every true will give you true. This is a little bit more complex. If this is, like I say, confusing, just use it in the way we've explained it up to now. And then the last thing that could also be slightly confusing is that some of these inputs into the if formula is optional. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I'm gonna say this is a salary, or no, let's say this is a salary of 50,000. I want to say if this salary, I'm gonna write a normal formula. If this is bigger than say 40,000, then I want to say you're well paid, else I want to say you need a raise. Just something simple. So this is a formula like we've discussed it before. But if you place close attention, I'm going to copy this again and write a formula. If so, you'll see at the bottom this guidance of how to put this formula, or how to complete this formula. So you'll see you're going to do your logical test. So what do you want to test? And then there's a value. So what must happen if it's true, and what will happen if it's false? In Excel, all formulas, if you see the square bracket here, it means you don't have to say something there. So what do I mean? So I can again do my test. So I'm going to say if this is more than 40,000, then let's say I don't care what happens if it's true, but if it's false, you see what happened? I press comma and it just moved into the next parameter here. So this is now bold. If it's false, I want to say get a raise. That's fine. So what happens here? So this is not true. Let's suppose you have 30,000. It will tell you to get a raise. Or if this is 50,000, it doesn't do that. If you do not provide that check there, that second check, it will always go to 0. So I could say, right, remember, if I want to say in here you're well paid, and I leave out in this case a second, you still need a comma in there, because a if formula needs 3 parts, but you don't have to fill in something, so you need at least a comma there. So there you can see now what happened. If you're there, you get well paid. If you get 30,000, you'll get 0. So you'll just need to know if you're going to use the if formula without completing all of the variables or all of the inputs, the when those blanks become available, the Excel output of that will be 0. If you click on the insert formula, you will see what happens. What it says here is that if it's omitted, so we've left it out, true is returned. True, remember, if you remember the example just above, true will get to 1 or to get to 0 if it's false, and that is why we get 0 if you do this. Also, what you need to take note of, remember in the one example above, we had multiple if formulas. It says here you can nest up to 7 if formulas inside each other, and that is in short the logical functions if, and or. I would say try and master the if formula. That is something you can use over and over, and it will make a lot of complicated otherwise formulas much more simple. Hi, this is Anton from the Data Developer channel. If you've liked this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up below and subscribing to the channel, and thank you for watching.